This is Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association, your source for the latest Iowa ag news headlines right here in the heart of the heartland. With reports from our award-winning team of Dustin Hoffman, Riley Smith, Mark Magnuson, and Andy Peterson. Now, from the IARN studios in Des Moines, here's Dustin.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Hoffman. Today's Tuesday, the 16th of September, 2025. So glad you could join us. Coming up a little later on in the program, we're going to get the closing market analysis with agmarket.net. But first, we're going to sit down with National Pork Producer Council Dr. Ashley Johnson. We're going to talk more about the latest release of the MAHA recommendations, how that differs from what we saw in June during World Pork Expo and even in May when we talked in Washington, and where we're going from here. Right now, Dr. Ashley Johnson. Dr. Johnson, we have talked at length this year, you and I, about the MAHA situation, the Make America Healthy Again. We talked in Washington, D.C., kind of ahead of everything. At World Pork Expo, we kind of had a preliminary idea, and there was some concerns there. Now we've gotten the recommendations. First of all, would you bring us up to speed on what we saw come out of those recommendations here recently?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the time to continue talking about such an important subject that's going to have years and years of impact on agriculture. And what came out recently, actually just last week, was essentially MAHA's long-term strategy plan. And so this is as it relates to, it has multiple different recommendations, kind of what their future planning is. And a lot of the sentiment from agriculture is that, there wasn't too much of an uproar. And I think a lot of that is because there wasn't any, outright bans, like what maybe some proponents were wanting, which was like bans on pesticides, things like that. But what we actually end up seeing is, like I said, this long-term strategy that could actually really lead to some kind of government overregulation. And what I mean by that is that there will be actually a completely reorganization of HHS, and it will actually create a new administration for a healthy America, or AHA. And that administration, I think, is something we have to, in agriculture, really pay attention to, because what they want to look at is a lot of different testing, especially when it comes to cumulative studies. So that's going to be testing your water, testing your air, testing the microbiome, and seeing how that relates back to childhood chronic diseases. And so we really need to be paying very close attention to the oversight that this administration for a Healthy America is going to play in its role for agriculture. And so that's definitely something that came out of that strategy document that we are going to be very heavily engaged with. We've been kind of dealing with issues before with government agencies kind of trying to step over the bounds and out of play. In other words, especially when it comes to antimicrobials and antimicrobial resistance and some of those things. And so we're obviously very used to kind of being able to play referee and making sure that people don't overstep in those bounds. And so we got to pay attention to this and see how this actually reacts to agriculture. And then we still, of course, are going to have from the strategy document a lot dealing on the nutrition front. And so I've talked with you at lengths about how, there's going to be definitely with the dietary guidelines for Americans that are going to be released sometime this fall, or at least by the end of the year, that are going to actually address the ultra processed foods conversation. And that's what we've kind of talked a lot at length of. This definition that they're going to have is going to really play an important part of how, especially pork products, but lots of agriculture products, are able to be incorporated into like federal feeding programs. What are the nutritional actual recommendations around these products? And so that's something that is very much talked about in the strategy document, and that we are going to have to be very heavily engaged in.
And that's going back to what we talked about with the bacon and the sausage, correct?
Yes.
And how that might be lumped in with something like super sugary cereals and pop and things like that.
Yep, absolutely. And so there's actually, since we last talked, there is a request for information that has jointly been put out by the USDA and HHS. And they're calling for comments about a definition that they want to create a federal recognized definition of ultra processed foods. And interesting enough, they're also kind of looking at not only what does that definition entail, but are we using the correct terminology? And I think that that's something very critical that needs to be addressed, because processing should not be what's demonized, right? I mean, everything's processed, right? If you cook something, that's processing. And so processing is not what we should really be paying attention to. It's really about the nutritional quality of food. And that's what we're going to really be able to support our comments in, is especially making sure that nutrient-dense foods such as sausages and bacons and those pork products are not lumped in, like you said, and put in the same category as things that are not going to give nutrition, right? They are essentially those kind of junk food or discretionary foods. And so we certainly need to make that distinction. And that's really where we should head down, is actually looking at the nutritional quality of food versus the processing.
And it kind of almost made me think as you're talking here, it's like if you compare bacon and sausage to, say, the lean pork cuts, like the pork loin and stuff like that, obviously there's a difference there in health range there and what it brings to you. But yet, to say it's like those things that are bad for us, the potato chips, all the cheese sauces maybe, or I shouldn't say cheese because we don't want to offend our dairy farmers here, but also, talking about the pops and stuff like that again, there's obviously a huge difference there.
Absolutely. And the big difference too is also to remember a lot of times when we are talking about these products is that we package them to be able to be shelf stable, right? We make sure that there's food additives there that protect against bacterial growth. So we are also talking in a context of food safety and making sure that we can deliver nutritious food to people in a very economically stable way. And so there's those corner points too that I like to mention, because I think they're so critical to this conversation, because I always say that nutrition's not nutrition unless you eat it. And so if we can't deliver nutritious food around this country and make sure that those foods don't spoil, make sure that they're also safe to eat, we're going to be in quite a pickle, to be quite honest, if we can't do that. And so we shouldn't take away those products that are able to do that, right? That are affordable, that are healthy, and that we can still meet those needs of people that need that, safe food that can actually last the amount of time that they need it for, especially when we talk about like our elderly populations, right? They are typically on a budget. They need to have foods that, are able to last longer in their fridge. And so those are key things that we have to think about when we're making policy changes like this, because it really affects everybody.
And it's interesting, when we were talking at World Pork Expo, obviously the concern was that ag didn't have a presence at the table when these discussions were being had. And now that we see the recommendations come out and they're maybe not quite as severe as we thought they were going to be, like whether grain or livestock side, I mean, how confident or how good do we feel about the fact that it seems like they've taken those recommendations, and instead of putting an axe to them and saying, no, this is absolutely going to change, let's go ahead and reevaluate where these things are and see how we can move forward. How does that make you feel when you're going into these discussions now later on about, talking about the classifications of what these foods are, that maybe they are going to listen to ag a little closer before they just paint with a broad brush?
Absolutely. And I think there's been a heck of a lot more conversations with agriculture, which is great. And there's also been an echo chamber, right? Agriculture has really stepped up, made their voices heard, and said, hey, you say farmers are at the forefront of this issue. Well, make sure that farmers are there at the table and have that voice. And so there's been that echo chamber, which is great. And it's great to hear everybody have that similar message. And then there's also been this education across the countryside that we've been working very hard, because I think everybody understands what we're trying to accomplish, right? We're trying to, of course, make sure that our kids have healthy foods, make sure that everybody, has that access, but to make sure that there are unintended consequences when we kind of lump everything in. And so there's been that huge movement of education where a lot of people weren't thinking like, oh, if I make this policy, I am going to accidentally lump in a lot of great agricultural products. And so having that education has been absolutely key throughout the country, with especially policymakers and those that are going to carry that voice further for us. And so I think that that definitely reinvigorates me. Make sure that everybody understands, what are the challenges that we're facing if we create a policy like this that could be especially everlasting within school systems and with the dietary guidelines for Americans, and how that actually trickles down to everybody. And so I think that at least gives me a lot of hope that people are starting to see that there are differences between these foods, and that words matter, definitions matter.
And that's really interesting as we're getting ready to wrap up here today. Obviously, this is something that affects more than just the pork producers. It affects agriculture as a whole, all the different sectors. Obviously, all of them coming together to work together to find out what this is all going to mean, what these definitions are. How important this message can go to people who aren't pork producers, but how important is it now that these farmers, whether they're grain, livestock, beef, poultry, dairy, whatever, make that voice heard or work with these organizations to get that message out?
Yeah, I think this has been one of, the biggest issues that everybody in agriculture can relate to. Everybody has a stake in this. And I think that is very eye-opening, because a lot of times we are siloed in our issues because we have a lot of things that we have to pay attention to and we have to work towards. But this is one that we all need to get band together and make sure that the policy is absolutely situated in understanding how farmers and producers make food, make safe food, make affordable food for Americans, and make sure that our voices are absolutely at the forefront of this conversation. And so I think that this is a unique opportunity where all of agriculture can sit and stand up together and be able to educate the public, educate policymakers, and make sure that everybody understands, what we're doing is to make sure that Americans are healthy, and to protect the nutrition that, of course, that we deliver every single day to American plates.
All right, Dr. Ashley Johnson has been our guest here today. And Dr. Johnson, where can people find more information about National Pork Producers Coalition, work on this and what they're doing and how they can get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. You can always go to our website at nppc.org. We have all of our policies and issues there, right there on the webpage. And of course, who works on these every single day. And, also just to the pork farmers, right? To straight to the mouths of who we represent every single day is probably the best people you can talk to about our issues, and how we are, of course, making sure that we are at the forefront of these policy issues.
All right. Well, Dr. Johnson, I thank you for the update and look forward to talking to you more as we get more of these clarifications on what these definitions are.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks to Dr. Johnson and the folks at the National Pork Producers Council for giving us that information. We're going to take a short break and hear from the sponsor, Iowa Soybean Association, and the Soy Checkoff. When we come back, we'll look at the closing numbers. This is Ag Matters PM.
Iowa Soybean Association is driven to deliver for Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. We're proud to provide objective agronomic research, a helping hand with soil and water stewardship, and timely industry news powered by the Soybean Checkoff. Learn more at iasoybeans.com.
It's time now for the Ag Matters PM Closing Market Summary, your source for market analysis and settlement prices from the day's trade in Chicago, courtesy of the folks at agmarket.net. We're back on Ag Matters PM, and I'm joined right now by Kenan Layden of agmarket.net to look at the closing numbers. And Kenan, had a little bit more of a positive day today than we saw yesterday. Tell us what happened in those grains.
Yeah, you could say it's a bounce back Tuesday after the disappointing action Monday, after a really strong market action, especially in corn and beans after Friday's WASDE. Corn recovered to that 429, 430 level, back again here after the sell-off yesterday. Exports continue to be good, and the market is balancing the large number of acres with the disappointing yield reports that are coming in from across the nation, and trying to reconcile the two information. How big is this big crop? Soybeans, got good news. Soybean crush was a little higher than expected with lower soybean oil stocks. Crush has seemed to recover pretty well. Maybe getting some guidance on that renewable fuel reallocation to refiners. There's some rumblings of that. Soy oil was up strong on the day, and wheat even had a update today off of some contract lows we were scoring last week in the contracts. So all in all, just a good day for the grains. So hopefully we can continue the momentum into the rest of the week.
We were talking before we went on here, Kenan, about how the soybean situation is. We're talking about how some of these basis bids are really low in different parts of the country. We were talking about what you're seeing in North Dakota, but that really is still that main story, that no matter how good or maybe not as good as we thought the beans are, we need to be able to move them somewhere.
Yeah. Beans, it's been time is a flat circle quote from season 1 of True Detectives. Beans have had a range all year and they haven't violated that range. So until these November beans get over 1075, I have a hard time thinking that without more demand in China coming in, that these beans have a huge upside to them. Um, there's no bid for beans some places in North Dakota up where I'm at. They just there's no home for them. Corn exports have taken up a lot of the capacity for us out of the PNW, and I'm sure out of the Gulf too. So it's just a crop with no home now, which is going to know lead to prices being pressured potentially, especially if Brazil grows another record crop, as they seem to every year these years.
Yeah, that is true. Moving over to the livestock side of things, how did cattle and hogs fare today?
Yeah, down day in the cattle and hogs today. Cattle had that explosive move back up yesterday after a limit down move last week, at least in the feeder cattle, and a little softer today. That cash feeder cattle index has been softer for a few of the last like 4 to 5 days over the last week, which is usually cash is what's pushing this so hard. So with, maybe some of that cash leveling off, this market is deciding where it wants to go. Managed money has been reducing some positions in that feeder cattle contract. So makes you start wondering, is there some rotation here in these markets, maybe back to the grains away from some of the livestock? Managed money was very long hogs, and, they're slightly softer on the day. So just a couple of things to keep an eye on and see how these markets trade. So cash so far has been the driver in the markets, and that'll be important to watch as I talk about every week.
All right. Well, Kenan, a lot of things for us to be thinking about, especially, trying to get some of those things marketed. If folks want to look at some of the intel, some of the things like you shared here today, and want to find more information about what agmarket.net is looking at, where do they find that?
Yeah, Dustin, just eggmarket.net. Go online, check out the market information, look for a broker in your area.
All right. Kenan Layden's been with us here today on Ag Matters PM. Kenan, thanks so much for the insight. Appreciate it as always.
Thanks, Dustin.
That's been a check of our market analysis with the folks at agmarket.net. Let's go ahead and take a look at the closing numbers on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network market screen. At the close, December corn was up 6 1/4 at $4.29 1/2. Soybeans for November up 7 cents at $10.49 3/4. Soybean meal up 60 cents at $2.85.80. Soy oil up 93 cents at $52.69. Chicago wheat up 9 at $5.34 even. Kansas winter wheat up 9 1/2 at $5.23 1/2. Kansas spring wheat up 6 3/4 at $5.36 3/4. Minneapolis spring wheat up 4 3/4 at $5.76 1/2. Oats up 3/4 cent at $3.19 even. Live cattle down $1.15 at $233.45. Feeders down 20 cents at $354.30. Lean hogs down 15 cents at $97.37. Pork cutouts unchanged at $103.10. And Class 3 milk up 12 cents at $16.60. And that's been a check of our closing markets, and that brings us to the end of today's show. You can find all our content online at iowaagnet.com, and also find us on Facebook, X, and our YouTube channel. You can also check out our free market podcast delivered free of charge 3 times a day right to your mobile device, openings, middays, and closings. You can find those on Google, Amazon, Apple, Spotify, and Podbean. You can also check out back episodes of Iowa Ag Matters, Weekend Ag Matters, and Ag Matters PM all online through our various network channels. From the IARN studios in Des Moines, I'm Dustin Huffman. For Andy Peterson, Mark Magnuson, and Riley Smith, thank you for watching. This is Ag Matters PM.